You are about to meet a true international beauty with a shape that blends elegance and excitement. Corvair for 1965. All new international beauty from Chevrolet.
Hi everyone, I'm Bruce Hitchin and welcome to Center Lane. This episode is about one of GM's most radical cars of the 1960s, the Chevrolet Corvair. With the Corvair selling over 1.8 million units in its 10-year run, it was by any measure a success. But the Corvair is mostly remembered for controversy. The Corvair got a raw deal. It was groundbreaking and a departure from the mainstream in the early 1960s. While the quirky little Volkswagen Beetle could get away with a rear-mounted air-cooled engine, it wasn't what anyone ever would have expected to come out of Detroit. Let's start with a little bit of history. In 1952, a guy by the name of Ed Cole was promoted to chief engineer of Chevrolet. And a few years later, he was named general manager of Chevrolet and vice president of General Motors. As chief engineer, Cole was very involved in the development and production of the Corvair. Cole was also heavily involved in the development of the Corvette and is credited as being the father of the small block Chevy V8. Until 1960, the big three automakers produced cars that were all about the same size, big. If you wanted a smaller car, you had to look to European models or to the Nash Rambler or Studebaker Lark, which appealed to buyers looking for a more efficient and compact car. In the 50s, sales of these smaller cars demonstrated that there was a demand by the US consumer. Ford and Chrysler addressed that demand by creating scaled-down versions of their conventional designs, using smaller engines and bodies. These were cars like the Australian-built Ford Falcon with its straight six and Chrysler's Valiant with its slant six. Over at GM, Ed Cole's team introduced a completely redesigned car, one that took clues from Porsche by using an air-cooled engine. In fact, it was a horizontally opposed six-cylinder engine mounted in the back, a flat six. An engine design that Porsche started to use a few years later. The styling of the Corvair gained the attention of the automotive world. Ed Cole and his Corvair were featured on the cover of Time magazine, and Motor Trend named the Corvair as the 1960 Car of the Year. Enter Ralph Nader. Ralph was a consumer advocate that focused on automotive safety. While Nader viewed most cars as dangerous, he targeted the Corvair due to its unconventional design. The Corvair utilized a swing axle suspension, requiring tire pressure that was about 10 pounds higher in the rear. While many consumers set their tire pressure to be the same all round, it resulted in handling issues. That, combined with the car's inability to bear heavy loads and oversteering issues caused by the absence of an anti-sway bar, the Corvair developed a reputation of being unsafe. GM later addressed these issues, and it's important to note that many drivers of Corvairs never experienced any problems with handling. Nader went on to write the book Unsafe at Any Speed, which targeted the American automotive industry. While Nader's efforts did result in some good changes, including the Highway Safety Act and the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act, Nader had political aspirations, and the handling issues of the Corvair were overblown by Nader. Its handling was no worse than the Beetle, but Nader exploited it for his own means. In 1971, the National Highway Safety Transportation Board declared that the Corvair was as safe as any car in the early 1960s, but it was too late to matter. My friend, Glenn Barron, has a wonderfully preserved Corvair Monza, and he's here to give us a walk-around tour of this 1966 survivor.
Hello, my name is Glenn Barron. Today I want to introduce you to my car. I've been in possession of this car now for about 4 years. It's a very controversial American-made car, and it was the Chevrolet Corvair. This car is a 1966 model. It's got a lot of history behind it. I want to walk you a bit through that today. It was a car that at the time when Chevrolet built it was very much ahead of its time. It was received kind of mixed by the public. And then I think we're all familiar with the story and how Ralph Nader became associated with the Corvair. Ralph Nader himself actually didn't kill the Corvair. It was GM that killed the Corvair. We'll talk about that in a minute. So let me start by showing you some of the car. The Corvair was first released to the American public in 1960. From 1960 to 64 was considered the first generation. This is a 1966 model, second generation, ran to 1969. But what happened was the early generation cars had issues with the rear suspension. And there was a belief that it caused the car to turn over in sharp cornering. It was later found to be untrue, but at the time, the public were persuaded, and the Corvair itself started dropping in numbers rapidly in sales volumes. Chevrolet actually decided to continue building the car in spite of the controversy with Ralph Nader. And in the end, it was the cars like the Ford Falcon, the Chevy 2, and ultimately the Mustang and the Camaro that killed the Corvair. This car is a two-owner car. I ended up buying it off the original owner in 2012. He factory ordered it brand new. I have the order sheet from that owner. I also have the window decal for the original price and the sale of the car. He kept the car for almost 47 years before he was ready to sell it. When I bought the car, it had 38,000 original miles on it. Today, it has 44,000 miles on it, documented with logs. Every time he did a service on it, every time he put gas in it, he kept a log. And now I've been doing the same thing since that day. The real special piece about this car, it's unrestored. It's had one paint job in the early 1980s in the original lacquer Chateau slate color. Other than that, the interior of the car is completely original. The engine has never been removed from the car. The only thing I've done to the car since I got it was to do an upgrade on the wheels and tires, so it actually is a nicer car to drive. I have the original wheels and I have the original hubcaps that came on the car from the factory. So the one thing about this car that makes it very unique is that not only is it not restored, but it survived a full-on tornado back in the 90s. This car was parked inside a garage. The whole wall of the garage was sucked out by the tornado. There were bikes and lawn chairs and other things in the garage that got sucked out as well. There is some scars on the paint. If you get close enough, you can see some of the damage. It's been touched up over the years to try and preserve it. But amazingly enough, none of the items that were pulled out of the garage hit any of the glass. All of the glass in the original is to the car, and it's never been damaged. So let's take a look inside. So as I mentioned before, the car is completely unrestored inside. Everything you see in here is the way it came in 1966. The door panels, steering wheels, dash pads, seats, carpets, everything. Nothing's been changed. So we're talking a real time capsule here in this car. And that's what I've done since my term of ownership. Really, I'm a custodian of this car. It's become a museum piece, but it's a museum piece that I actually enjoy. We take it out, we take it to shows, we show it to people. But my goal is not to actually improve anything on the condition right now. It's to maintain the condition, to keep the car in running order, and to be able to have the opportunity to go and show it and share it with other people. So the Corvair is a rear engine powered car. It's not the first car to be manufactured with a rear engine. The Europeans were doing that many years before Chevrolet did. It's not even the first American car to actually have a rear engine. That honor goes to Tucker. But it was the first air-cooled flat six rear engine car. A lot of people think flat six, air-cooled, first thing that comes to their mind is Porsche. But Porsche was late to the party on the flat six. Chevrolet beat them. So let's take a look at the engine compartment. So this particular car is the Monza edition. The Monza had a little bit nicer trim, and it also had a more powerful engine. You had a couple of options. This was 110 horsepower. In 1966, there was also 140 horsepower. This particular car's got the 164 cubic inch, flat 6 air cooled. Spare tire was mounted in the rear. This is the original spare tire. It still actually has the little nubs on the rubber, and you can actually see there's a red mark across it where the factory made the pen mark when they installed it in the car. Spare tire's never been mounted on this car. For weight purposes, a lot of people thought the spare tire should have been in the front, but if you put the spare in the front, you actually would take a large chunk of the trunk space up there to make this work. So the trunk's quite cavernous, but if the tire had been put in there, it would have taken up a lot of space. So let me come around and show you the trunk on this car. So you can see in here, there's a lot of room for your luggage, your bags, anything you're doing, traveling, going to the store. But you can also see that if they put the spare tire in here, it would have taken up about half of the space that was available. This is all original paint inside, the factory finish, the speckled paint in here, and you've got your windshield washer bottle. So lots of space in here for your luggage or trips to the store. As well, everything has easy access for working on. And believe it or not, parts are very much readily available for Corvairs today. Well, that's my car. I hope you guys like it. Little overview, a little bit of history about the car, and a little bit of history about the Corvair itself. Thank you very much.
For car lovers, Corvair, a most unusual car for people who enjoy the unusual. Corvair for 1966, waiting for you at the usual place, your Chevrolet dealers.